Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Zone Star State podcast. I'm Matthew Brune, and joining me once again is Ishmael Johnson. And Ish, we're done with all the interviews. We're done with getting to know all these teams and everything. We know everything now, all
We
right?
know everything.
And now it is time to talk about these teams with a little bit of depth and to get into our preview content because we're less than 3 weeks away from tip-off
Thank God.
in college basketball. So this week's going to be our rankings week. Next week we're going to have some fun with our fantasy draft that we've done the last couple of years, and then we'll do our predictions the week after that, and then it'll be time for basketball. So first up, we have the top men's basketball backcourt and front courts in Texas. There's 25 teams in Texas, so we're doing the top 10. The way that I like doing these is kind of a pound for pound type thing. The way you phrased it is, I'm going to hold Texas Tech in comparison to where they are in the Big 12, as compared to Lamar in the Southland and so on and so forth. So with that in mind, we can jump right into it if you want.
Let's do it.
Do you want to start at 1 or do you want to start at 10?
Let's start at 1. Let's start at 1.
I think that's how we usually do it.
Yeah.
Number 1.
Yeah.
The Baylor Bears. Backcourt. Number 1 backcourt in Texas. Jeremy Roach from Duke, VJ Edgecombe, the star freshman, Jaden Nunn returns, Rob Wright, awesome freshman, and then Jalen Celestine from Cal, who could be a forward, but shoots so many threes, and he's such a kind of perimeter player. I put him as a guard. And then you also had Langston Love, who, when he's healthy, is started for them games. So that's 6 players I just named that are all really, really good.
Yeah, and then we add let's for the discussion's sake, it was between them and Houston. Houston's number 2. Yes. Houston with Milos Uzan, LJ Cryer, Uzan, of course, from OU, Emmanuel Sharp, of course, returning with Cryer, with Malik Wilson, Terrence Arsenault, who is back healthy again. I think he was supposed to play a little bit of the 4 last year, but we know he's size-wise, he is a guard by all intents and purposes. 6'5", 6'6", yeah. Everybody knows he's a small ball, very much emphasis on the small ball forward. So he's included in the backcourt. So it came down to those 2 teams. And I think for me, at least, the difference was, I think, knowing what Houston has with Cryer and Sharp, right? And then you maybe add Uzan to obviously not replace Jamal Shed. You can't replace him. But like if you add that playmaking to a backcourt that already played together in Carr and Sharp to at a high level and almost beat Duke. Let's not act like they didn't almost beat Duke without Shed. Then, okay, cool. Then I think those 2 guys alone, or those 3 maybe are probably better than, like, let's say what we know about Baylor's backcourt, right? We haven't seen Roach and Edgecombe play together yet. I would assume that's probably the best 1-2 combo in the conference potentially, but we know that Cryer and Sharp are one of the best. And so adding that, I think the difference was Baylor adding everybody else, right? The fact that Langston Love was the 6th name you mentioned, right? I think that's the difference. And then also Roach, obviously the unknown is that Roach, we don't know how Roach and Edgecombe look, but we can probably predict they'll be pretty damn good.
Yeah. VJ Edgecombe, I'm not gonna lie, I just think he's gonna be incredible.
I think he's a star. I think he's legitimately a star. Yes.
I think he is a lock to be a top 5 pick in next year's draft. I think he's gonna light the world on fire. I think he's gonna be one of the best players in the Big 12.
Yeah.
We saw him in what he did with the Bahamas. I
was about to say, like, that's the thing I look to, and that's the thing I remember if you haven't heard our interview with Scott Drew, it was like he's playing next to Buddy Hield, DeAndre Ayton, and Eric Gordon, and they're deferring to him. That's insane.
There's nothing that's going to catch him off guard. And I understand, like, when he plays Houston and whoever else, the Big 12, like, he will have his ups and downs, but I just think he's going to be awesome. He is that game changer. And then Roach is an awesome point guard, like we talked about. The addition of Celestine as a shooter for them is huge on the wing and in their backcourt. So I think they're the number 1 backcourt. And then Houston, like you talked about, more of a known commodity with this group. Arsenault is a wing, forward, guard, whatever you want to play him as, but I put him in this group. Honestly, it just comes down to Uzan. Comes down to Milos Uzan to see how exactly he replaces Jamal Shed. And he doesn't have to be perfect, but he does have a lot on his plate.
And I'll say this: I don't think it's not a given that this team is going to be as good defensively, perimeter wise,
It's impossible.
interior wise. It's possible.
Well, is
Go ahead.
I don't know if it's possible. Jamal Shed is one of the best on-ball
Right.
defenders
No.
that
Yes.
we've seen
Yes.
this decade.
Right. Right. And now, what does that mean for the? We'll get to the backcourt, later, or front court rather later. I think that'll potentially just get better. But yeah, perimeter wise, we know that LJ Cryer is not the best defender. He did good last year. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But we know Sharp is a good defender. We know Malik Wilson's a good defender. I don't know about Uzan, right? And you replaced, like you mentioned, the best defensive player in the country and probably the last 3 to 5 years. The best defensive player we've seen since probably. I was gonna say Davion Mitchell, but even Mitchell didn't really take off till the tournament. Really,
Yeah,
it was like we went into the season knowing Jamal Shed was the best in the country.
Jamal
So
done this for years.
yeah, so it's that's my only question with this Houston team is how good's the perimeter defense without one of the best players in the recent memory. So again, not a bad problem to have. They're only going to be very good versus historically good, but we'll see. That was my only negative, if you want to call that a negative.
Yeah, and Houston. Well, we'll get to their front court.
I will say, I don't know if you saw first in KenPom ratings came out. Houston #1. So
they're going to be very, very fun and very, very good again. So can't wait for Houston fans to find this and get mad at us. Right. But regardless, let's move on. We got a lot to get to, which I think 3 and 4 we can group together as well here because it's the next 2 up. 3, we have Texas A&M. Wade Taylor, Zurich Phelps transfers there from SMU. Manny Obaseki returns. CJ Wilcher from Nebraska is an addition, and then Jace Carter. Texas is the 4. Julian Larry, Indiana State. Julian Pope from Oregon State. Trey Johnson, 5-star freshman. Tremont Mark from Arkansas, and Kendall Weaver returns. That's 3 and that's 4. Would you flip those at all? Do you like them there? How do you see them?
It would not stun me if eventually Texas is a 3, in terms as the year goes on. Yeah. What we know now, I'm definitely more comfortable taking A&M. We know that Wade Taylor needed a Robin, right? He needed somebody else. Me and you can speculate on how well we think that actually fits. That's more of a wait and see thing. But as far as on paper talent, I think Phelps and Taylor are as far as known commodities, I'd probably put them as the 3rd best duo in the state on paper. As far as adding a player, all conference potential in Wade Taylor, all conference potential in Zurich Phelps. It is what it is. Actual fit, we'll see. Where I think Texas has an advantage is there's a lot of potential here, a lot of potential.
Much higher ceiling here, I think.
Yeah, very much a higher ceiling. Of course, Julian Larry, Jordan Pope, but of course, Trey Johnson right there with VJ Edgecombe as far as being the best guard in this class. Tremont Mark, somebody who really took off last year at Arkansas. Of course, Houston fans remember him. He kind of really got lost in that backcourt when he was at Houston. And then, of course, you look at Kendall Weaver, who we talked a lot about Kendall Weaver last year. I think he's somebody who is going to continue to get better. And if he ends the year with as big of an improvement, I think you're looking at a potential dark horse, all second team, all third team, that type of dark horse player in him. So depth wise, edge goes to Texas. Known quality wise, probably A&M right now, but potential, I'd give the edge to Texas too.
Yeah. Wade, I have no problem if people want to flip this Texas at 3 A&M 4. I will say though, Wade Taylor's the best player between these two. And
easily.
I'm not as high on Trey Johnson as I am VJ Edgecombe, clearly.
Yeah.
But he's still going to be a good player for them, and I don't think he's going to have nearly as much on his plate as Edgecombe will. So he can kind of find his way and figure out how he's going to fit. Because out of high school, he wasn't really much of a standstill guy. I liked him off the dribble. He could get to his mid-range spots a lot. Trey Johnson's clearly physically developed and can play, but it might take him some time there, and then we'll see how the other transfers kind of fit in that group. So I like Wade Taylor kind of to take the lead here. That's why I think at 3 I have A&M with a slight edge here. At 5, we can do 5, 6, 7.
Sure. Yeah, I'd say I feel I like that classification.
5 is going to catch some people off guard, but if y'all are paying attention, then it won't. 5, Sam Houston State. Lamar Wilkerson returns after, I believe it was 14 points per game. Damon Nicholas returns as well. Then they add Josiah Hammond, who averaged 11 a game at UIW. They return Marcus Boykin. They add Brennan Burns from JUCO. I think this has, especially in Conference USA, this is one of the best backcourts in that conference, and that makes it one of the best backcourts, I think, in the state.
Yeah, I was about to say, outside of, I mean, you're looking at maybe La Tech as far as being like, I think La Tech was the favorite, right, to win Conference USA.
Them and
Outside of
Liberty's always good and stuff. But
true. Liberty's always, but as far as like outside of them, you're not looking at a team that's clearly better than Sam right now. Again, they're in that discussion with Liberty. And yeah, I'm taking the team that has more returners from a team that competed for a conference, right? I think that's the safe pick. If you want to go with a team that, to compare them to 6-7, UNT, Latrell Jostle, Atlin Wright, Jasper Floyd, Rondell Walker, Jonathan Mossy. And then Texas State below them, Tyrell Morgan, Caden Gums, Dylan Dawson, Mark Drone.
Oh, we switched.
We switched. Yes. Okay. So I'll throw 8.
Throw them in there.
So Tech is at 7. Tech is with Elijah Hawkins, Chance McMillan, Kevin Overton, and Curran Walton. And then Texas State is 8. But we switched those at the last minute. So if you want to tell me that Sam right now is 5, yes. If you want to tell me that UNT or Tech would be 5 in a month into the season, 2 months into the season, that wouldn't shock me. The thing, of course, with UNT, how does Latrell Jostle jump up to American play, right? How does Atlin Wright jump over? How does he fit in as well? Jasper Floyd, these are good players, but like, how do they play together? For Tech, literally the same question, right? We talked to Grant McCaslin, and I think on paper, Tech has, as far as a starting 5, I think Tech has the most gelled, like on paper, starting 5 with people knowing their roles in the state. I'm not joking. Like, that's the shooter, that's the defender, that's the playmaker. Right now, of course, we don't know how they fit yet, right? So having them at 7 conservatively, I think that's conservatively optimistic. And then Texas State, I'm not high on them this year. Even though I do like Caden Gums, I think he could be one of the better playmakers in the state. He's going to be clearly probably one of their best players. Dylan Dawson, I think they're going to rely on him, but it's like, okay, there's a lot of players who need to step up, which is why I argued for them to be dropped below Texas Tech.
Yeah, very fair. On the North Texas point, North Texas at 6 might seem high to some people. I think this is a group, and this is, first of all, Ross Hodge and North Texas in general have gotten the most out of their guards year after year, like just consistently. They've had first team all conference guard, 4 straight years, I believe, was from Javion, 5, Javion, Tyler, and then last year, Jason Edwards. So
good point.
They just get the most out of their guards. So I think Latrell Giselle is going to have a really, really strong year. Tin Wright out of Drake is honestly one of like the sneaky, really good pickups, I think, for all of the mid majors in Texas. I could see him having an awesome year. And then you kind of fill out from there. Rondell Walker, we saw him just as like a Swiss Army knife for them. So I think them. And then Jonathan Massey from Longwood, he played in the NCAA tournament last year against Houston. I remember talking to him when he joined, and it was like, you get to ask him about playing against Houston. You get to ask him about making the run in the tournament. He had, I don't remember his average off the top of my head. It was somewhere around 10. Is like, he knows what it takes to win. And these guys, I think, fit what Ross Hodge wants to do. And so I'm very comfortable with them being at that 6 number. And then real quick on Texas Tech, I like Elijah Hawkins quite a bit.
Yeah.
And then Chance McMillan as well returns. But as a whole, if you're just telling me like Elijah Hawkins, Chance McMillan, Kevin Overton, Kerwin Walton is your group, that's not like, I don't know if that's a top 5, top 6 backcourt in the Big 12.
Sure. I can pound for pound. Yes. If we're going back to the idea of like how they compare to the, yes, like that's a team that you wouldn't take over Houston or Kansas or Texas in on paper. That's more for me. That's more of the sum is better than, the sum of the parts is better than the parts individually. Because I agree, right? There is a star quality lacking there. We'll talk about their front court. That's kind of in the other end of the floor for them.
Yeah. Texas Tech fans, don't turn this off. Trust me.
I was about to say, please.
Get to the front court part of our podcast, and we promise you'll be happy. but yeah, I think that's a good group. And then Texas State, you know better than I.
Yeah.
Caden Gums is the one for me that if he takes off, then it's okay. We're looking at this team a little differently.
Right.
Tyrell Morgan, I have in this group, even though he only played 2 games last year. In those 2 games, averaged 14 points per game
Yeah.
before getting hurt. So maybe get him back. Add a couple guys, Mark Jerome from JUCO and stuff. So maybe they can figure it out. I think them at 8 is fair.
Mhm.
In the Sun Belt, they should be competitive enough
Yeah.
in the backcourt. Then we go to 9 and 10 here,
Yeah.
and this was really interesting because the honorable mentions that we'll get to I actually like quite a bit as well. 9, we have TCU, and 10 we have SMU. TCU is a whole new team.
Yes.
And it has to be the most turnover in the entire country. It has to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you go
I
look at
don't
their
see.
roster, you look at last year's roster and this year's roster.
Yeah.
The only player I think that has returned is Ernest Uday, who's in the front court. And
Yeah.
I don't have their
No,
front court.
Isaiah Manning,
Okay.
who
So
didn't
let's
play,
say they
but
have 2 or
he was
3.
on
I'm
the
probably
team.
missing one more. I'm probably missing a
Yeah,
couple
so
more.
that's fair. That's fair. I was thinking of the whole roster, but it's like 3 players still. So
Regardless, if you go down their scoring from last year is
yeah.
just all gone.
Yeah.
So it's hard to assess who is actually going to be good and who's actually how well they're going to play together here. With that being said, I like Frankie Collins from Arizona State quite a bit. Vashawn Alette from Old Dominion as a freshman at Old Dominion was phenomenal.
Mhm.
Then Brennan Wetzel from Wyoming is a veteran player that I like quite a bit. He's 6'8", but he handles the ball a lot, has a lot of assists, and shoots the ball well. So those 3, just off talent, I'm comfortable putting them in this top 10. And I think that's going to be TCU's strength this year is in the backcourt.
Yeah, I think so. I think Jamie Plunkett from Frogs Insider also mentioned this. Like, this is going to be a year where we kind of see a hard reset for TCU. Like in terms of like they're not all in on this year, right? They're going to pick some guys who, like you mentioned, flash something. Vashawn let flash something as a freshman. Can he do it at the Big 12 level? We'll see, right? It's a big jump from the Sun Belt to the Big 12, but he was an all-conference player of the year candidate type player in the Sun Belt. Now, it may not be this year that it clicks. It may be next year that it clicks in the Big 12, but they're willing to invest in the multi-year transfers, as opposed to teams like Houston or Baylor who need at least like one star guy to bring in to kind of shore up a championship contender team.
Yeah, so that's TCU as a whole is just going to be a team that we're going to have to learn about on the fly. Heck,
Yeah,
I think the coaching staff is learning about them on the fly right now. So there's no
right.
shame in us having to learn about them on the fly. And 10 SMU here. I went from SMU at number 8
Mm-hmm.
to outside of the top 10, and now I have them at 10 because I just think the talent is too good.
Yeah.
But then again, going back to the pound for pound thing, they are playing in the ACC. So
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
not if they were in the American, I'd say, okay, this is like the best backcourt or one of the better backcourts in the American, and therefore, because everything that these teams do, and the reason why I think going pound for pound is the best is because everything these teams do is to get to the tournament.
Yes.
And so that's how I view these teams. Like a successful year is getting to the tournament and meeting your expectations. SMU, I think, is a really talented backcourt,
Yeah.
but it's like in the ACC, I'm not sure exactly how well they're going to hold up. Boopy Miller, transfer from Wake Forest, was very good, 14 points per game. Chuck
Mhm.
Harris returns. Cario Quendo, we've talked about him when they added him. Georgia to Oregon to SMU. And then AJ George from Long Beach, a good scorer as well. So good players. As a whole, for SMU, I just need to see what it kind of looks like under Andy Enfield and how they
Yeah.
play.
Yeah. I don't think I'm okay with putting it at 10 as well. Just because like when we get to the honorable mentions, I don't know who's clearly
Yeah.
above them right now. And I see teams that like I like potentially, but I don't know anybody who I would rubber stamp right now to be better in their conference than SMU. I think they'll be a respectable ACC team, as in like they're not going to be dog walked. They're not going to win the conference, but I think they know that this year heading into Enfield's first year.
I think they were predicted 10th in the media poll preseason, somewhere
That's
around
fine.
there. It was
That's fine.
it,
Yeah.
it was around that area. And it's like, okay, 10th out of I think it's 14 or 16
Yeah, like they'll be
16 ranked.
fine.
Yeah. So, um, definitely deserves to be in the top 10 off talent. Good group. Honorable mentions. UTSA is the first one.
Yeah.
And boy, Austin Clonch is going to make me a believer really, really quickly if these guys play the way that I think they could play.
Yeah.
Skylar Wicks from Incarnate Word, they're their leading scorer. Damari Monsanto from Wake Forest. I remember when I did some part-time work at Wake Forest about 4 years ago when they signed him. He's really good. And when he's
Mhm.
healthy, he's really good.
Yeah.
Then Primo Spears from Florida State,
Primo
another
Spears was a big pickup too.
really, really big talent there. So that's three guys with a lot of talent. We'll see how they gel and how, Clonch gets them to play, but that's definitely the first honorable mention for me. A&M Corpus Christi, first of all, we're going to talk about their front court. Their front court is in our top 10.
Yeah.
Backcourt barely misses. This is a team that returns like 4 of their top 5 scorers. I always see his name wrong. Dion, Wright Ford, Jordan
Mhm.
Roberts, both coming back as like 10-point per game guys. They added Leo Torber from New Mexico Junior College. Jaden Walker from ECU was a contributor. So I like A&M Corpus Christi's backcourt. I love their front court, but it's a good group. UTEP, Devin Barnes from Tarleton, Corey Camper, David Terrell return, Ahmad Bynum from JUCO, Lamar, Jashawn Jackson, Jay-Sean Jackson returns, BB Knight returns, Cody Pennebaker returns. So I like that core for them. And then SFA made the big splash, getting Chris Johnson from Texas.
Mhm.
So you have to include them here. Kyle Heyman returns, and then they added Keon Thompson from UMass. So that's the backcourts. That's 15 deep,
Yeah.
and I like all of them.
I was about to say, I think for me, the team you mentioned UTSA, the team I'm going to look at is UTEP here, because I think adding Devon Barnes to Corey Camper to a breakout David Terrell season,
Yep.
Ahmad Bynum you mentioned as well. I think that's a team that, again, it depends on if they can continue to gel under Joe Golding like we saw at times last year. I think potentially KJ Thomas as a true freshman comes into that discussion defensively, similar length. Potentially, we'll see if he plays a lot, but that them and UTSA are the two teams in my opinion that I'm kind of like really have my eye on,
Yeah.
kind of making a jump this year.
Yeah. There were other teams that I looked at and considered. It's hard when there are so many transfers, especially at the smaller schools, to kind of
Yeah.
discern who exactly can and can't play. So you kind of lean towards returning talent,
Mhm.
especially at these smaller schools.
Yeah.
You kind of have to prove it otherwise. But yeah, that's the backcourt. Let us know what you think down below. Now let's get to the front courts.
Mhm.
Let's talk about the bigs.
Let's
Um,
do it.
this one was easier, I think, because this one was easier at the top, I'd say. Uh,
I think this one can go similar 1 and 2,
1
I
and
think.
2. Yes,
And
1 and 2
then
was clear to me. I almost
there's a
had
lot in the middle.
yeah. Um, Houston's number 1.
Yes.
And Texas Tech fans Texas Tech's my number 2 or our number
Yeah.
2. If Texas Tech fans want to be upset at it, you can, but until you do what Houston's done repeatedly and return this level of player that has this identity, um, I don't see how you could put anybody but Houston at number
Yeah.
1. Dewan
And if they wanna
Roberts. Go ahead.
go at it again, we could always switch Arsenault and put him in the front court too. Like
Yeah, we could
like
always do
this
that
doesn't even
too.
include Arsenault, who may be more of a 4. So
Yeah. Juwan Roberts, Javier Francis, and Joseph Tugler. That's it.
yeah.
I mean, again, you could add Arsenal if you want. I don't even think they need them.
Nope.
Those 3 embody Houston basketball
Yeah.
and are single-handedly going to tear apart teams in the Big 12 like they did last year.
Yes.
I just think those 3 are phenomenal. So that's number 1 to me. And that's number 2. Like we said, Texas Tech, JT Toppin from New Mexico, comes in as could have been, drafted in the second round, ends up coming back, goes to Texas Tech. Darian Williams, great player, starter. Devin Cambridge, starter when he was healthy. Then they added Federico from Pitt. Very, very, very good front court there for Texas Tech. I think that's clearly the top 2 in the state.
Yeah. No, I think when you look at everything involved versus like known commodities, you look at potential, you look at how they're going to compete versus the respect of their conference, like it's those 2. And it's Houston 1, right? We like the fact that this front court could get better, right? Javier Francis took a huge step last year. And if he can take even half that step, you're looking at an all-conference defensive player, right? Juwan Roberts, already the best defensive player, probably returning in the conference after they just lost the best defensive player. So okay, cool. Joseph Tugler, saw a lot of flashes from him. Wasn't the cleanest season, but he learned a lot playing next to Roberts and Francis. So yeah, those three, anybody, I'll take up against anybody in the country defensively in the front as a front court. But Tech, like, potential's there, man. Like, we talked about that star. That star is JT Toppin for this team. Darren Williams is back. Devin Cambridge is back. Like, Federico coming in as a transfer adds so much to this team. So I love this team top to bottom. I love this front court top to bottom. And I think this front court is how you can get away maybe with that lack of dynamic star power on the backcourt, is because you have a Toppin and then Federico and then these guys that have roles and reliable skill sets in the front court.
The next group, I think we can go like 3 through 6.
I was about to say this is pretty.
So I'm typing all of them out right now.
Yeah.
As we talk. 3, Texas A&M. I think part of this is it's not just based off talent here.
Mm-hmm.
It's the fact that they were one of the best rebounding teams in the country, and especially offensively. And that's where Anderson Garcia was like one of the best offensive rebounders in the nation.
He got the biggest one of the season.
Then, so then they get Pharrell Payne from Minnesota, who I think is going to be really good for them. They return Henry Coleman, who was kind of was fine last year, maybe didn't reach our expectations. But then you also have Solomon Washington, another rebounding monster. So for what this team wants and what this team does, I think A&M at 3 is completely fair there.
I agree. I think that Pharrell Payne is going to be a big addition to that front court. At 4, which may surprise some people, you mentioned it, A&M Corpus Christi, man. You got Gary Clark coming back, Owen Dise coming back, Sheldon Williams from JUCO, and then Stephen Giwa from coming back as well. Look, we talked about whether they'd keep things going after Steve Lutz left, and Jim Shaw so far. We'll see this year. Obviously, more players of his. I guess he recruited everybody because he was there under Steve Lutz, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
His primary guidance. We'll see. Obviously, this year, but you win 20 games last year, and I believe let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 game win streak to end the year. Okay, yeah, we're gonna give you the benefit of the doubt if you return a lot of those guys.
Yeah. Gary Clark was their leading scorer, very good player. Owen Dise as well was in the front court. So Sheldon Williams put up huge numbers in JUCO. We're always, we need to wait to see how exactly that translates. But I mean, I'm cool betting on a guy that can put the ball in the basket. So A&M Corpus Christi in the Southland is 4 for me, obviously with SFA and McNeese and whatnot. That's going to be a challenge, but that's still a very good team there. 5, which I don't know if this is low to people, but Baylor at 5, Norshad Omier from Miami is awesome. Josh Ojenwuna we'll have to see. Freshman Jason Esamoda we'll also have to see. But the front court is not the strength of this team, right? I think we've had Matt on, we've had Scott Drew on, and it's always like, how do you figure out with the amount of guards that you have? How do you figure out how to piece it together? Do you have to go small with Omier at the 5? Like, how does this fit?
Yeah,
it's Omier alone merits the 5th spot, but I can't put them really any higher because I don't love Josh and I don't, Jason's a freshman.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that every Baylor fan is going to be like, if we can get the Josh Ojenwuna that showed in the second half last year, then maybe there's something here, but still banking on a lot. Number 6, they're just ahead of Texas, which I may have Texas ahead.
That's fair.
Just because, I mean, it's one spot, so it's not anything egregious. But Caden Shedrick, Arthur Kaluma from Kansas State, right?
Kansas State, yeah.
That was Kansas State, yeah, you're right. And then Jason Kent from Indiana State. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah. I like Jason Kent a lot. I think Caden Shedrick at times last year was a little overmatched, right? They kind of had him doing the Dylan Dessou dirty work to start the year, and it was like, oh, it's a little not his role. Yeah. But I think that I really think he's a good player, and I think he's going to show a lot this year. and I love the Jason Kent pickup. So I'll say I think on potential, I definitely think they're probably ahead of Baylor. But as far as I don't hate having them one spot behind.
Yeah, I think Caden Shedrick has to take like a significant step forward to me. There
Sure.
were times I think he was played off the court.
Yeah.
Where I don't think I know he was played off the court, and that's where they had to go, Dessou with the 5 or whatnot. They had to kind of change things up.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But having Kaluma and Kent, who are versatile forwards and can score and can, you know, play in a different way, I think helps a lot replacing Dessou.
Mhm.
So I have no problem either putting them at 5, like 5, 6 is kind of interchangeable here. I think having Omer kind of puts Baylor a little over the top, and Josh being the known commodity puts them over it. But Kent and Kaluma are definitely good players.
Yeah. Here's the other thing that's going to be maybe a detriment. We'll see. Texas front court, little frail, kind of a lot of skinny big, right? Caden Shedrick, skinny big. Jason Kent, skinny big. Kaluma's a little bit thicker. I think he's like 220 or whatever. But like
Yeah.
that's a lot of like 200, 215 in there, which will be interesting to see
Right.
versus like a Houston or something.
Bomani Jones says, "Tall man, not big
Yeah,
man."
tall man, not big man.
Let's keep it moving. 7 and 8 we'll
Yep.
group together here. 7 UT Arlington, 8 Texas Southern here. UT Arlington is none of the players returned. These are
Yeah, they
4
had
newcomers
they had a
here.
great year last year, and everybody said we'll take that.
Yeah, everyone is gone. But they added some dudes here.
They really did.
Lance Ware from Villanova, formerly of
Yep.
Kentucky,
Yep.
um, clearly has talent. And I remember when he was at Kentucky. He didn't play like a ton, but I
Mhm.
remember him. So Lance Ware, Rayshawn Seamster out of JUCO put up big numbers. Deontay Smith out of Nichols, I believe, was first team all conference in the Southland last year. And then Troy Hupstead from Maryland Eastern Shore was the defensive player of the year in his conference. So
Mm.
that's 4 players that check different boxes that should allow UT Arlington to replace. And then, I just kind of trust what KT Turner has there.
I
We
was gonna
didn't
say that's
include
the
their
biggest thing
guards,
too. Yeah.
but I'm sure he's going to get the most out of their guards as well. So,
Yeah, I was gonna say that's the biggest thing is KT Turner earned a lot of credit last year just from like a team that was going nowhere before he got there, and he just came in year one and all of a sudden had him competing in the conference. So, yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of potential here, and add the potential with what we know that KT Turner is going to potentially get out of them. I'm okay with that.
yeah. And then Texas Southern, don't want to call anybody out, but they only have 7 players on their roster online right now.
Yeah.
But Grayson Carter and Kenny Hunter are 2 of them, and
I was about to say we do know at least 2 of them. So
the SWAC had both of them as all conference players going into the year. So 2 all conference forwards, you get on the list. Grayson Carter, Kenny Hunter. We've watched Texas Southern. Like Carter in himself is not like an efficient post player. I think he was maybe sub 50% last year field goal percentage. Kenny Hunter was slightly above 50%. But I think defense and rebounding between these 2 is strong enough to have them competitive and have them in the upper echelon of the SWAC this year. So Texas Southern at 8, 9 and 10, 9 SMU, and 10 UTEP here. Same thing with SMU. Really the same thing with every team that has a completely new roster is trying to figure out who's talented, who's good, who's going to play. And SMU for me, when you add Matt Cross, who was really good at UMass, then you add Johan Traore, who was a really high recruit and did really good things at UC Santa Barbara last year. And then you add Jarrell Colbert, who hasn't panned out the way I think he hoped, going from LSU to Kansas State, now SMU, but he's still like an athletic body that I trust.
Yeah.
I think that group, again, should at least hold its own in the ACC. And then also, I don't think anybody else is really meriting or deserves to be put on this list above them. So
No, yeah,
congratulations.
I'm officially signing up for the Matt Cross fan club. When we were looking when he first committed, I looked up some of his highlights and I'm like, I don't know why. I love like this. This is for universal for me. I love the 6'6" to like 6'8" big who can kind of dribble, kind of
Yeah.
shoot, kind of play make, right? You can kind of do everything. And it's like you're not great at everything. You're not great at one thing, but you can just do a little bit of everything. And you're not like the fastest guy either, but you just know how to rim run regardless. Like I love that type of like guy who just he's kind of like just a basketball playing forward. It's kind of weird to say, but like go look up what he did at UMass. It's like a lot of like beating everybody down the field in the fast break while the point guard is bringing the ball up the court. It's a lot of knowing when to flare out to the outside. So I'm a big fan of what he can do. I'm okay having him, as like number 9, just because like as far as like guys brought in, he's the one guy in the front court where I'm like that guy. I like him.
Yeah.
UTEP, we'll see. That backcourt wasn't great last year, and it really hasn't been great since Golding got there. But it's not really his bread and butter. But I also don't know who to pick over them. So
Yeah. Otis Frazier returning is probably. I mean, Otis Frazier alone probably puts them in this spot here.
yeah.
Derek Hamilton, Elijah Jones, Kevin Kalu, like all these guys are returners that averaged like 4 to 5 points a game last year outside of Frazier. So it's like, continuity. That's what Joe Golding wanted. So now he's got that in the front court. So shout out to UTEP there. The honorable mentions here. I like Stephen F. Austin's front court quite a bit. Tierno Sila from UCF actually played a bit there. Keith Lamar from Florida A&M was a good player. Nana Antiboasiako was a starter last year, so they returned him, and then Krishan Christmas as well. So SFA is one that is right on the fringes, and I feel bad not having Stephen F. Austin on either list here because they should be a good team, especially now in the Southland where they should be competing with like McNeese to potentially win it. So, maybe they should have been on this list over UTEP. That's probably the first honorable mention I want to mention before anybody else says anything. It's going to be a really talented Stephen F. Austin team, but I just couldn't quite bring myself to put them at 10. Maybe if I redid it, I would. Rice, I actually told you this off air. I don't like Rice's backcourt, and again, new coach, new team. Like this is, I don't know how many of those there are, but new coach, new team. We need to figure it out. But on paper, I like this front court. They have Caden Powell from Wyoming, who actually played a good amount there. Jimmy Oladokun from San Diego, and Kellen Amos from Central Connecticut State. Then just real quick, Lamar, I think, is going to be good again, even though they lost a lot of players. They added Terrence Dixon from North Texas, returned Adam Hamilton. Sam Houston State returns Cameron Hefner, who was hurt a little bit last year, and Kean Scroggins. TCU is, like we said, whole new team. So I don't really know what to make of this, but Trezarian White from UNC Wilmington, good. Ernest Uday returns. North Texas, I'm not super high.
That's a lot of unknown.
It is a lot of unknown. And on theory, like Brock Weiss should be good. We'll see. Brennan Laurent played for FAU, was good. We'll see. Grant Newell from Cal. We'll see. Mule Sissoko isn't the highest ceiling player. So that's the honorable mentions. Anybody that you want to talk about?
No, I'm interested to see probably as a whole, just like Rice in general, just because obviously Rob Lanier going in there after doing an okay but not as good as they wanted to job at SMU. It's going to be an interesting transition for them as well. Like obviously going play styles, going from Scott Parrott to Rob Lanier. So how well that translates, we'll see. I think that play style is conducive to the AAC. So like, I think they'll be able to be competitive, but is that in year one? We'll see. But yeah, the front court, it's not like you mentioned. I think there were 10 front courts that we felt comfortable with. Probably 9, honestly, because UTEP's really just Otis Frazier.
9 and Otis Frazier.
Yeah.
And like I said, SFA maybe should have been on the list. Maybe put a tie for 10th with UTEP in there, but because I think SFA is the only team that didn't make either list that I would probably be like they should finish top 3 or 4 in their league. So I do want to give them a shout out for sure. That's it. There you go.
Cool.
We'll be back later in the week to do the women's top 10 front court and back courts. I feel like these give us a really good feel for the teams going into the year. A lot better than having to do individual team previews. So let us know what you think down below. Leave us a like, comment, share, subscribe if you haven't already to Dave Campbell's Texas Football on YouTube. That's where we're posting our videos now, but then also on the audio side where we have our own platform there for Zone Star State. So we'll be back later in the week. Basketball season's almost here. Hang with us. We'll be previewing. We'll be back doing 2 podcasts a week. So we appreciate all y'all for joining us. And we will talk to y'all later.